we're gonna react to Chrono Odyssey is not ready. To be honest. Within that one day I played before break, there was a lighting issues, there was a movement issues, there was a server kicking, and some other stuff. So yeah, we're gonna watch this video, we're gonna see what they have to say in their review, and I'm gonna compare it to my experiences as well. So let's go with that.
Chrono Odyssey, a game we've had our eyes on for about 2 years now. Ever since the first trailer dropped, this game was marketed as a next-generation open-world MMORPG, published by Korean-based Kakao Games.
Wait, it really was 2 years already? I followed this game since the beginning, but like, I didn't know that was like 2 years already. And they still so bad.
Developed by the aptly named Chrono Studio. This was looking to be the next big thing for the MMO genre. At least, that's what the trailers portrayed to us. You see, last weekend, Chrono Odyssey held a closed beta test where many players were able to finally try this highly anticipated game for themselves. With a peak concurrent player count of over 65,000 people on Steam and many streamers playing the game, there were a lot of eyes on Chrono Odyssey. That's when this otherwise stunning-looking game began to show major cracks in its facade.
It wasn't even looking that good.
Visual bugs, lots of jank, and whatever the hell this is. It was very clear from the start that this game isn't the same game from those early trailers. Now let me just say, did we really think we're getting a game, let alone an MMO that looks this good? Of course not. But let a man dream, right? Not to mention, this downgrade is pretty substantial across the board. But before we get into all the negatives, believe me, there are quite a lot of them. I first want to give a quick rundown of what we actually got to play last weekend. This is going to be a very brief overview, and there are tons of videos out, including one we watched from Canon that went into great detail, so definitely go check it out if you're interested. So as we mentioned earlier, Chrono Odyssey is an MMORPG. Think things like Final Fantasy XIV, New World, the best one, RuneScape, or I guess these days, old school RuneScape. For Chrono though, you have 6 classes you can choose from, with only 3 being made available to use during the beta. Those are the Berserker, the Ranger,
Yeah,
and
that
the
also was
Swordsman.
dumb. Like, I was prepared to play role, and I just couldn't. I just had to play a Ranger. Which, okay, bow is my thing. I like bows. But like, other weapons were kinda bad. And the gameplay of them also didn't look that good. I heard the warrior swordsman, I'm sorry, had the most optimized skills and weapons. Especially greatsword, like, I don't know. Oh, also the berserker, but that's not justice for me.
With the Sorcerer, Assassin, and Paladin being unavailable. Now, each class has the choice of 3 different weapons to choose from, with 2 of them being able to be used at a time. For example, the Berserker can make use of either chain blades, twin axes, or battle axe, while the Ranger uses bows, crossbows, and rapiers. As mentioned, 2 of these can be equipped at each time, which brings us to the game's weapon switching mechanic. This allows you to swap weapons and gives you access to a whole new moveset and abilities. With each weapon being able to equip 4 skills, this essentially means you have 8 different weapon skills to choose from at a given time. For example, with the Ranger, we often use dual crossbows in combination with the rapier to cover both close and range combat. Now, each weapon also comes with its own unique skill tree. These offer various different active skills as well as passive skills, which can vary from flat damage increases or even benefits for switching weapons. But this leads us into combat, which in all honesty is actually Chrono Odyssey's biggest bright spots, at least so far. The combat in Chrono is very reminiscent of a Souls-like. You got your iframe dodges, your telegraph boss attacks, you got a stamina bar.
About those iframe dodges, especially in this boss, you can see they just don't work. Or maybe this boss is just that bullshit, it can just like switch the way they jump at. Just like, I struggled with this boss a lot. I spent like 40 minutes trying to beat him, maybe hour, I don't know.
that you have to manage. It feels familiar, and the combat is pretty solid. It also works well with the weapon switching mechanic. The other unique feature this has is the chrono detector. At first, this is essentially like an enhanced vision mechanic that lets you see things like footsteps, for example, but as you progress through the main quest, you unlock different functions. After defeating the first boss, this introduces the summon mechanic, which allows you to summon any of the main bosses that you've defeated to help fight with you for a short time. Now, this is on a long cooldown, but it's really cool, and it helps a lot when dealing with bosses or even groups of enemies. You also get the ability to briefly freeze time, which can be useful for things like catching them out. Now, as for the rest of the game, it's all pretty standard and what you would expect from an open world MMO. You have your main story quests, which for the beta consist of us fighting for bosses, and this seemingly could only be done as a solo player, as trying to enter the boss arenas with a party would always disband it. Then you have side quests, varying in length. You can always tell when an NPC has a quest for you because they'll have this little icon above their heads. There's also a decent amount of dynamic side quests that would randomly pop up in the open world. For instance, this one naked guy who pleaded with us to help him find some clothes. There's also world bosses around that would essentially patrol in a given area. These were cool because we had plenty of moments where 10 to 20 people would randomly show up and everyone would help fight these bosses, which is pretty cool.
I didn't
so pretty
have that.
much, if you've played an MMO before, this is all stuff that you would expect, but this is when we get into the problems with this beta. Some minor, but others major, that needs to be addressed before the game launches. To start with what you've been staring at for most of this video, the overall visuals and performance aren't great. I would even go as far to say that in many instances, the game flat out looks terrible. Tons of pop-in when you're traversing the open world, really bad lighting, on top of weird lightning glitches. Like when we would get close to the main town, the lightning would almost always freak out and flicker as we approach. Many areas.
This lighting was fucking crazy. Like, honestly, how did they manage to bring that to the beta close to the opening of the game, since they still plan to open this game this year, I think. This was just super bad. Not only that, characters also felt junky as shit.
Also just had really bad textures, either on the rocks or even just the ground itself. There's also a good amount of cutscenes that just wouldn't work. Like, you need to interact with these things to reveal portions of the map, and many times the scene that's supposed to play would just completely break. Performance-wise, everything was just all over the place. In the main town, on high settings across the board, we would typically drop down to anywhere between 30 to 40 frames. Then in the open world, it stayed fairly consistent at about 60 FPS, but with many frequent stutters, especially when entering load zones. Now, Chrono Odyssey is, quote, seamless open world, and that much is true, but it's also very obvious when you're hitting those invisible load zones, because your game would lag for a second before coming back. We also weren't able to get anything above 60 FPS, really anywhere, aside from the very small indoor locations, like the Citadel, for example, which seemed to be a hub-like area, but had no real use in this beta. In there, we would get maybe 80 to 90 frames per second on average, but that's also a small portion of the game. Luckily, in the boss fights themselves, though, this wasn't much of an issue, as that stayed pretty locked at around 60 frames, this being on high settings. I will say, though, that when I did try to dial things up to its highest settings, the frames would drop drastically. I'm talking like in the 30s, and I've got a pretty good PC. Granted, I just built my rig with the 5090, so the next time we play Chrono Odyssey, we'll be trying that one out, but I was still very surprised to see these type of frame rates on a 4090. Now, the real reason why I was really trying to crank up all the settings was just because the game doesn't look that great. The game by itself is very gray, and then when you add in like the ugly textures, the bad.
Okay, I myself tried to crank up some settings, and I was met with like huge lag, like, I don't know, 2 minute lag of entire game. And then there was like, I don't know, maybe 10 FPS in the game. When I returned to the medium settings though, I had like 40 like before. And I don't have bad PC as well. This is terrible.
Performance and the really rough anti-aliasing, you get a combination that's really not very good to look at. Another negative actually has to do with the combat. Now, while the combat as a whole is definitely a strong point for Chrono Odyssey, the same can be said for the combat camera. It's almost essential that you play the game without locking onto enemies, especially bosses, as the lock-on camera.
Okay, as a ranger, I can say the combat was good. I was just there most of the time just shooting basic arrows, and was boring as fuck. So yeah, I don't think the combat is good either. I don't even speak about locking camera because I didn't even use locking because yeah, it was bad.
Is just bad guys and will typically whip around a lot when fighting bosses and almost shove itself into the ground when trying to stay locked onto bigger enemies. For a game with Souls-like inspired combat, having a bad lock on camera
Like this
certainly
camera
hurts.
just looks
Now, on the
shit.
topic of combat, there were also multiple occasions where bosses would knock you over, but it would take your character way too long to get back up. Normally, if this happens in like a Souls-like game, you get iframes at least for a bit until you get up, but here, you just don't, which would often lead to a boss knocking you over, you not being able to get back up, then them attacking again and killing you. And I don't know if this is like an intentional design, but to be quite honest, it was kind of frustrating. These are just some of the many things that fall under the overall umbrella of what I would just call jank. And oh boy, does this game have a lot of it. We highlighted it in the intro, but on this boss in particular, which is the final boss in the beta, they would essentially wind up to do the sword attack and often get rubber bandits into the air, which isn't exactly great when you're trying to time a dodge to avoid the attack. Now, this other main boss would frequently break and would just freeze midair, which would then allow us to lay into them and kill them. But I would say that the enemy AI as a whole is just pretty bad. Many random enemies in the open world sometimes won't even acknowledge that you exist, or
I would say enemy AI is just not existent. It's just so bad. You often just kill enemies before they even get to you. The moments when you can just die is when you just pull a lot of enemies. They're still body as shit. So when you pull a big group, you can just die to you don't even know what. That happened to me like at least twice.
if they do, they just run towards you in a straight line, sometimes not even attacking. Perhaps the most infuriating thing is the fact that your character will not interact with something like 80% of the time. What I mean by that is literally anything: chopping a tree, looting, activating a lever. If you aren't at the perfect angle to interact with whatever it is, you'll either just sit there doing nothing, or your character will run in place trying to line themselves up. It's extremely frustrating, especially because one of the bosses requires you to interact with the levers in order to deal damage to it. So you can imagine trying to activate a lever while dodging a boss who's trying to step on you, but the button for the lever isn't even working because you're not lined up right. Jank! Alongside all of that, character animations for running and jumping are pretty rough. When you're running, you often look like you're just gliding along the ground, and everyone can do a double jump. But to be quite honest, guys, it just looks off. The animation for mandolin on rocks or anything else also follows the same.
This there just shows how bad this game looks, how bad the movement for characters is, and overall it's just not there. If they don't really release this game this year, I feel like it's gonna be dead pretty soon, or at least have a really small community, and all the people who played the beta or whatever gonna come here, see it's still trash, and just leave to other game. And again, we also have a Blue Protocol game releasing this year globally. It's made by a Chinese studio. It's not even a big studio, I think. And they managed to make the game better than Japanese Blue Protocol was. I think I was playing this on Steam once. It was pretty bad. Combat was off. The visuals was pretty good, though they boosted even visuals of the Blue Protocol Star Resonance, so I'm really looking forward to that. I was looking forward to this junk as well, but like, I don't even think I'm gonna return to it, to be honest.
Same trend and just looks bad. And I'm really not trying to nitpick here, guys. Even if my expectations weren't high, the reality is, at least from my experience, Chrono Odyssey is just janky. Now, we didn't really get to see anything monetization-wise. Again, this is just a beta, but in one of the interviews, the developer did say that they are committed to having zero pay-to-win features. However, in another interview, they go on to say that they are open to having pay-for-convenience features, which, by the way, is exactly what pay-to-win in an MMO looks like. For instance, being able to skip a 10-hour grind, grind by spending some money, which then gives you a power advantage. And if you take a look at the track record of games from the publisher Kakao, they tend to have many pay-to-win mechanics. So when it comes to dev statements on this, to me, it's just a matter of I'll believe it when I see it. Now, if you've been following news about the closed beta, you've surely seen the mini videos out.
And to be fair, it's even worse in Black Desert right now than it was in with Kakao. Like, there's so many things in the item shop right now that wasn't there when I was playing the game. I returned recently for one day. I was like, nope.
Right now, absolutely bashing the game. One big counterpoint to the negatives people have been bringing up is the fact that the game is only in its beta. And we know that typically when we play an early build of games, they're usually like 3 to 4 months old at that point. In fact, the CEO even said on Twitter that the build that we're playing is in fact from last year, which in itself is a bit odd. But assuming that this is true, it is possible that some of these issues have been either resolved or at least worked on in the months since. The problem though is that this game is slated to release in Q4 of 2025, which is not far from now. A fact that was reiterated multiple times by Kakao Games themselves through earning reports. Now, in my personal, humble opinion, this game needs more time than that to cook. I'm talking like a year plus until it's ready to come out. The overall issues plaguing the game are far too abundant to be resolved in the next few months. And I know that they said that this was an old build. I would love it if some internal dev build comes out that they've been secretly working on that looks exactly like these early trailers. But I wouldn't put my money on it, guys. If this game were to release later this year in its current state, I don't have high hopes for its future. Straight up, the beta we played this past weekend, for me, screams that the game is still years away from being a true finished product. And I hope the studio recognizes this and gives it some more time to cook. Chrono Odyssey is an MMORPG, guys, that we've been looking forward to for so very long. And for this launch, I hope they get it right. So guys, that's it. Those are our thoughts. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching.
Okay, thanks for the video.
That like button like your mama.
Yeah. To be honest, I feel the same about this game. There was a lot of issues. I don't think they should release this year. I don't think this is gonna be ready. And even if it's gonna be better, even if we played actually the last year version of the game, we don't know what is in actual new version of the game, and we don't know what to expect. There might be even more bugs, even more visual glitches, and even more junk. Okay, that was that video.